Okay, welcome to everyone. We can start with the ordinary session A. After the very interesting plenary session with the contribution of Giuseppe, the keynote speaker, we can start our session about ecological structural change and financing ecological transition. Then we can start with João Pedro Braga. The title of his contribution is Addressing the New in the New Development Bank, a mission-oriented institution for financing BRICS ecological transition. João Pedro Braga comes from Sorbonne Paris North University. I think we can have 25 minutes to present the paper and 50 minutes for the or 20 and 15 for the discussion, because we have to end the session at a quarter to 6 p.m. European time. Okay.
Okay.
That is João Pedro. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Giulio, for the presentation and also for the possibility of presenting my research in this workshop. I think I'll aim for 30 minutes, and if I pass a bit, then it should be okay, so that we can have more time for discussion as well with Grégoire. Okay, I will just share my screen right now, and then we can start.
Thank you.
Let me know if you can see the screen.
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Perfect. So then let's start. First of all, it's a pleasure again. I would like to also thank the opportunity for the organization and also for the possibility to present this research, which actually derives from my master thesis. I have just delivered the master thesis. It's the first time that I present it. I haven't defended yet. So in a sense, this will be my first possibility and my first opportunity to talk about the topic that I have chosen to research in this last 1.5 years during the EPOG Plus program. EPOG is a program which is associated within different universities. And right now, my belonging is to the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa and Université de Paris, Sorbonne Nord in Paris. So the topic...
Which one university? Sorbonne and?
Sorbonne Paris Nord, yeah, exactly.
And
so the Paris 13th and University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa, Johannesburg.
Okay.
Thank you. So basically, the topic that I decided to approach, it's quite related to the understanding and in the workshop that we have different needs for emerging countries and different needs for developing countries to finance their own ecological transitions. Therefore, if we are talking about a new developmentalism or a green kind of developmentalism, then South institutions and South countries will actually need different programs and different strategies to actually tackle financing the transition. So my research is called Addressing the New in the New Development Bank. And I aim to understand how can the New Development Bank can get to position itself as an mission-oriented institution to finance the BRICS ecological transitions. Basically, there are a lot of terms in there that I would like to unpack, and I will try and do this throughout the presentation. But just on a brief note on what is the ecological transition. The ecological transition is a systemic change, is a structural change, is a shift from one set of productions and inputs, and also in a sense, the way that you organize labor, but also the way that the financial system is set towards another one in which you would have less emission-intensive sectors and less emission-intensive financing techniques that would allow for a just ecological transition. So there's also not only the emissions and the environmental aspect of it, but also the social aspect that the ecological transition should be considered also in the benefit of the most vulnerable, at least not to hurt them even more, to put them in a more vulnerable position. Well, starting the presentation, I will start with some brief remarks on the New Development Bank. So what is the New Development Bank? It is the multilateral development bank created by the BRICS countries in 2014. As a multilateral development bank, it is a financial institution which does not have the lending powers, but serves as a mobilizer and a intermediary of financial resources towards developing countries and towards countries who are actually interested in obtaining financing for infrastructure. Its mission is to mobilize resources for infrastructure and sustainable development projects in member countries. But the country, on the contrary of what we actually expected of the BRICS Development Bank, and by BRICS I mean Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is that this is not supposed to be in an oppositional way with other international finance institutions. Actually, the New Development Bank aims to be complementary with the World Bank, for instance, and with all the multilateral development bank system. In terms of membership, I have already told about the BRICS, and participation is open to all UN member countries. Recently, 1 year ago, the BRICS have extended membership and actually started to extend its membership to Bangladesh, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, and Uruguay. In terms of governance, the main issue, the main reason why the New Development Bank has the word new is that there is a equal participation share and equal financing share for each of the members, so that all of them have the same voting character and the same voting power. So in a sense, the corporate governance structure also reflects this. And the financial capital was initially decided as $100 billion, while the initial contribution and the subscribed capital was actually $50 billion. And these $50 billion were actually divided equally because of this equality principle that I've been just referring to within each of the amount, the founding members. So what exactly is the new about the New Development Bank? How can we understand how this bank materializes a new set of principles or a new set of objectives that aims to reform the architecture of the international monetary system, for instance? And what is new about the New Development Bank is the idea of equality. It's a bank that has kind of capitalized and galvanized in the idea that the international financial system needs to be reframed, and kind of trying to push to a reform towards mutual solidarity, mutual benefit, and mainly equality within multilateral development banks. So there are three claims of originality. The first one is equality. The second one would be the fact that the bank would only focus on niche, sustainable infrastructure investments. It would not lean and lend to health or to education, but it would focus on sustainable infrastructure investment. The third one would be the fact that the bank would build its capital base, or to capitalize, in green bonds denominated in local currencies. And by local currencies, I mean the 5 BRICS countries and the 5 and their currencies. However, the bank has been set in 2014. Right now, it's still in its first decade. And at some point, there are some limitations to actually understand what is the new about this bank. And my research kind of aims to fill the research gap and the knowledge gap at all, which is to what extent can we actually understand the bank as a new institution and what kind of development paradigm is there, so that we can verify these claims of originality. And then the second one is exactly what is the new in the New Development Bank? What kind of paradigm does it bring to the table? So I start with three main diagnoses, which is the fact that the New Development Bank has not received enough attention in the development community. So I aim to address the New Development Bank by putting an institutional and macroeconomic perspective on the bank to try and understand which are its sustainable development opportunities on the way forward. I've spoken a lot in terms of the introduction, but I think this really is the bulk of what I am to bring today. The argument is already there, and I will illustrate the argument with some of the data implications and also policy changes that the first year of operations actually provide. So starting from the introduction, I'll go to try and understand what is the BRICS challenges to tackle its sustainable infrastructure investment via the New Development Bank, and then try to understand how can we position the NDB as a mission-oriented institution to finance just BRICS ecological transitions. Basically, when we talk about BRICS, it is an unfinished project, but it is a cooperation. It is a kind of a platform for cooperation within the 5 biggest emerging economies. And it's not any kind of cooperation. It is specifically South-South cooperation. And as the NDB actually shows, it is cooperation focusing on sustainable infrastructure. Well, to unpack this idea, I actually will go back to the very idea of BRICS. Well, beyond the acronym, which we all kind of have heard at least once in our lives, is the idea that there is a institutional coalition for development cooperation between 5 of the most important, most significant emerging economies of the world: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. When we apply BRICS and the BRICS project to the field of development finance, we can actually see that the BRICS is still an unfinished project. However, it has tried to apply the principles of mutual benefit, solidarity, and non-conditionality to a reformist agenda. I say reformist because it's not a groundbreaking reform to the extent that creating an alternative international monetary system and its institutions, but trying to reform the existing one from within. So in a sense, these principles were applied in 2014 in the Fortaleza BRICS Summit, when the 2 BRICS institutions were created. The CRA, which stands for Contingent Reserve Arrangement, which is an equivalent of the IMF, and the New Development Bank, which would be the BRICS equivalent of the World Bank. These 2 institutions had a lot of attention at the time of the creation. However, the CRA, for many reasons which are not the scope of this presentation, did not get to materialize. So in a sense, the BRICS most successful country story of financial cooperation is the New Development Bank. And I'll focus in this institution for this presentation. Well, the NDB's mission is actually not in a void. It's not just the fact that the BRICS countries got together and decided to create a bank because they were willing to do so. At some point, there is a miscontentment and a misunderstanding of the needs of developing countries' finances and the needs for them to finance their own infrastructure, which is materialized and can be estimated. And this is specifically for emerging countries, has been estimated for in terms of their needs to finance the SDGs and to actually meet the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And this would be estimated at around $1 trillion yearly for emerging countries only. This gap is centered in the areas of sanitation, access to energy, but also transport and mobility. So in a sense, the main targets would be SDG 6 on sanitation, 7 on energy, and 9 on transportation. However, the bank has focused on sustainable infrastructure because it's said that this area has not been specifically targeted by the World Bank and by the multilateral institutions. It aims actually to build resilient infrastructure and to focus on SDG 9, promoting sustainable industrialization and fostering innovation. All the messages that we actually have heard in Professor Campos' previous keynote speech. In a sense, what this research highlights, is the idea that the NDB presents an important effort to close the investment gap. However, there are important needs for the NDB to evaluate the sustainability of its developments, especially when it comes to its corporate strategy, which is, it is a financial institution, but it's to some extent financialized. And for some internal reasons and external as well, the bank is still to effectively live up to the mission of to reform the international financial system. On the internal side, we can definitely understand that the BRICS heterogeneity implied a slow start for the bank. I will show that just in a minute. But on the external side, this last 5 years at least were extremely difficult in point of view of the geopolitical scenario, both with the pandemic and now with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, but also multiple crises, economic and political ones, in Brazil, in Russia, in South Africa, and mainly the conflict between India and China. So in a sense, there have been a lot of internal, external challenges to the bank, but also the internal ones. And I will focus on the internal ones to understand how this kind of odd external scenario has also impeded a faster start for the bank. Well, this table presents some selected indicators. It's a lot of information on the NDB, but mainly this table gives information on the first strategy of the bank. If we see, I hope you can see my mouse as well, but predicted by the, we have the years here from 2016 to 2021, the values for yearly paid-in contributions and approvals and commitment for disbursements by scenario. So this was what was predicted by the Articles of Agreement of the bank, the foundation. This was the forecasted scenarios, the pessimistic and the optimistic, and this is the realistic scenario, what they actually have made. And comparing focusing on this, the fourth part of the table here, we can actually see that the cumulative loans have been significant. Okay, $32 million for a bank which has been 5 years of operations. That's significant. If we see the loan disbursement, that's 6.9 million disbursements. That would be significant. But at some point, it is lacking the idea to compare how would the bank see itself. And if we see itself to compare loan approvals, the bank is right above the pessimistic scenario. So it really underperformed. For instance, for cumulative approvals, it actually approved $32 million, and it was expecting to approve between 32 and 44. So it's really on the lower bound. And for loan disbursements, the official value is 6.9 million, while the official predicted values, the pessimistic one was 5.8 and 8.1. So in a sense, it is a bank which has not yet delivered what it said it could do. And try to evaluate the limits of the NDB claims of originality, what I do in the coming figures is to try and understand how can we assess empirically these three main claims of originality of the bank. These are, again, the member equality, the focus on sustainable infrastructure investment, and green bonds denominating local currencies. So right now, what I'm trying to do is just to construct a methodology for the detailed operations of the bank from 2016 to 2021, which is the exact same period of the bank's first 5-year strategy. Also complementing with the annual report to try and understand what is the new in the new development bank. Have they been able to materialize their development strategy and their sustainable development strategy or not? So the following figures will kind of shed some light on it. If you see the overview of approvals and disbursements, basically, we can actually understand that the bank has been increasing its approvals. So in the left side here, we can see that the approved projects have actually escalated from 2017, maybe 2018 until 2020. And some of the cancellations have been registered, which is kind of normal for multilateral development banks. However, on the right side, if we compare total approvals with disbursements have lagged enormously. So they actually just started in 2018, and even in 2019, they were actually on a very low level. What actually helped the bank to disburse were the COVID facility loans. The bank improved a lot, and it developed an emergency facility for all the 5 countries to benefit from concessional credit to fight the pandemic, and this was actually very important for disbursements. If we continue checking and having a look at the claims of originality, these 4 graphs, I will not go into the detail, but they actually show that for each claim of originality, the bank is not necessarily performing quite well. So remember that the bank was focusing on providing finance for sustainable infrastructure. This is only 16% of their total portfolio. If we add up the information on clear energy, water, and transport, this does not even fit to 2/3 of the total amount. So this claim of originality is not mainly fulfilled. Most of the operations were actually sovereign funded, and in a sense, their engagement with the private capital markets and private actors within development finance is not really representative. If we add the currency of the operations, even though the focus was to finance in local currencies, most of the operations, more than 2/3 of the operations are in US dollars. And for the ones in BRICS currencies, most of it is in renminbi, so the Chinese currency. So in a sense, there is a concentration. And when it comes to total portfolio by country, most of the operations are concentrated in China and in India. Also, this would be expected to be 20% for each country, but it's not the case, especially within Russia, which is 16% of the operations, due to the fact that Russia has been receiving and paying the cost of the international sanctions since 2014, but mainly right now after the invasion of Russia. Well, This third part, we can actually just summing up what I have already tried to understand, that the bank has claims of originality, but it is not really delivering them. So what is missing, what is lacking in the bank? And this is the goal of this third part. I aim to give an understanding what have been the main problems with the bank in this first 6 years, try to aim and find a way to position the bank towards its own mission. So what I say is that I aim to position the bank as a mission-oriented institution to finance the BRICS ecological transitions. It's not my task to do it, in a sense, but I'm just trying to get a creative but also a pragmatic approach to try and understand how the bank can actually get to influence and finance national development strategies for these 5 countries. The way that I have done this in my research is trying to understand that case studies can actually be quite important to understanding how the bank has actually done that. In a sense, the bank has been playing a very powerful and important role, in a sense very positive as well, for the transitions in the BRICS countries. And I have just decided to study the cases of the operations approved in 2016. These operations, they were the first year of operations, so they really were important for the setting of the bank and for the bank to speed up its learning curve. But mainly, they actually provide a in-depth understanding of the bank's engagement with sustainable development. And to study those operations, what I did was to not only get the information which was on the website on these operations, which is quite shallow, but also to conduce 10 interviews, 10 semi-structured interviews with the bank staff and BRICS academics to try to understand and get a first-hand perspective on the projects and the reality of the NDB's development, especially new development paradigm. So the case studies together, I will not go in depth into the case studies, but I will kind of try and provide a key message, is to that the NDB has to rethink its engagement with sustainability. And to address the new in the new development bank, it actually needs to change the way that it develops its projects. It relates to local systems, it relates to the members, to actually become a full member of the development finance community. And then, in a second point, to get to finance or co-finance just BRICS transitions. These are the main features of the country. Maybe I'll start with the second one. These are the case studies. So for every founding member, I chose one project, which was the first project that they had approved for Brazil, for Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And most of the operations, all of them, focus on renewable energy, clean energy, some of them on solar, some of them on eolic energy, some of them on hydro energy. And most of them are actually using national development banks or regional development banks to actually implement their scope and to deliver sustainable development to populations. Their financial aspects is also detailed on the table. The lower amount was actually $180 US dollars for, it's $100 million for Russia, and the maximum one was the Brazilian one, $300 million. In terms of mission assessment, I'll actually just focus on this column here, the last one. For Brazil, the project actually shows that partnering up with national development banks on public value can actually deliver very well the understanding that the bank can make an impact, because it actually partnered up with the BNDES, the Brazilian Development Bank, to deliver this project on renewable energies. For Russia, is the understanding that even though it's a small operation, that the construction of a dam in the north of Russia, is the idea that the ecological transition is consisting of a multiple and local bottom-up solutions. The Indian case is quite interesting because the operation was cancelled in the end. So in a sense, to avoid cancellations and to avoid losing resources, time, and energy, it is important to choose the right partners. It was a partnership with the Carnot Bank, the nationalized bank in India, and this project never actually came into force. For China, it actually represents the understanding that green industrial policy is a mean and is an important way to actually advance on the ecological transition. It is a project which has been funded with sovereign guarantee from the People's Republic of China, and also in partnership with the private sector, with the Fujian Industrial Development Corporation. So South Africa is also an interesting case, understanding that the operation that they actually provided was a operation focused on renewing energy within the state-owned enterprise of South Africa, which is known for having a lot of mechanisms and problems for distribution of energy. And in a sense, it provides a partial fulfillment of the NDB's mission-oriented purpose. If I go back to the country challenges, just to make a link, in a sense, it's all these countries have different transition agendas. All these countries have different goals and different commitments to the national development contributions, to the long-term strategies of carbon neutrality. Even Brazil aims to be carbon neutral by 2050. Also, that's the case for South Africa, but Russia and China aim to be neutral by 2060, while India aims to be carbon net zero by 2070. In a sense, also the energy mix between these countries is crazy different. Brazil has a mainly clean energy source, comparing renewables to fossil fuels, while the case is completely the opposite for India and South Africa. And also political plans, Brazil has not really defined one specific goal-related plan for the ecological transition, while India and China have it, South Africa as well, and with Russia the case is a little bit more complicated. Just to understand that, like, the bank is not in the position to tell these countries what is the ecological transitions. They already have their plans. But what the bank can do is to provide those projects and continue financing and partnering up with local communities to actually get to deliver sustainable development. And this is what I understand as a roadmap of the NDB towards co-financing and delivering the BRICS ecological transitions. What I argue briefly in this image is the idea that the bank should not focus on one specific kind of investment. It should not focus on sustainable infrastructure investment. What the bank should focus on is to revitalize the global partnership for the sustainable development goals. It should aim at positioning the NDB as a co-financer, as a key co-financer of the BRICS transition by a threefold objective. The first one is to open the bank's governance to local organization. Right now, the transparency issue at the NDB is a huge thing. It is very difficult to get information on procurement, very difficult to get information on environmental safeguards, but also to increase the bank's public value partnerships, which is partnering up with civil society organizations, national development banks, regional development banks, with the private sector as well, but having always in mind the idea of public value. And third one is to help the BRICS to accomplish their either national development contributions, but also their long-term strategies for fighting climate change. And this would imply a whole range of sectors coming from all the way from sustainable finance, renewable energy, manufacturing, research and development, transportation, construction, climate action. And of course, this is a lot. This is too big. But in a sense, it is a framework to understand that the bank cannot do all of it alone. What it needs to do is to partner up with interesting like-minded organizations and mainly having the public value element to deliver the projects that it has already been doing. So in a sense, these could be loans for sustainable infrastructure investment, guarantees for renewable energy, fast-track emergency COVID lines, for instance, credit lines that the bank has already been doing, mobilizing actors for public-driven climate funds, green bonds for sustainable investments. These are just some of the options that the bank can do. And what we have seen is that the bank has already been delivering it, but it needs to emphasize the idea of public value. Right now, the idea of public value is not evident in the bank and in the bank's projects. So to wrap it up, the New Development Bank is a new institution. It materializes in a different set of not only paradigms, but also understanding of how the international monetary system should work. And therefore, it is an important institution to finance the transitions. The main reasons is that it represents a huge part of the world. The BRICS have a huge, at least they should aim for a huge saying on what the future looks like in terms of population, in terms of economics, in terms of GDP, in terms of forest reserves, the BRICS have a big standing, and if they have chosen the NDB to be their main case and the main means of cooperation, then the NDB is an important institution. And it also claims originality because of its different mandate. However, the internal and external imbalances are actually hindering the NDB's newness. And this is the case because the NDB reflects the bloc's imbalances. China and India on the one hand, and Brazil and Russia at the other, and South Africa comes somehow in the middle. It is kind of difficult to get the message across and to actually address and get the bank to scale up. The bank has implemented a new corporate strategy trying to increase and scale up finance for the sustainable development. And this is a step in the right direction, but the element of public value is still missing. So as the main takeaway of this research, and I will conclude right now, is that to understand these genuine opportunities that the bank still has in its future, a corporate strategy shift towards public value-centered partnerships, which means national development banks, regional development banks, civil society organizations, is essential to position the NDB as a key co-financer of just ecological transitions in the BRICS countries. Well, these are my references, and with this last slide, I thank you very much, and I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
João, now there was some problems, and then you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, but only now, because before was a problem. There is not Grégoire Noël is disappeared. I think there is some problems. There are some problems.
But I can see you.
Okay, Grégoire Noël. Okay.
Okay.
Then João Pedro could speak a lot and present this whole dissertation. Then was an opportunity for you to speak a lot. Thank you so much. But I don't know if there are some questions to João Pedro. But no problem. If there are some questions, you can do, because I can reduce my time at the end. I check the.
I didn't get it because you said 30 minutes, and I kind of spoke 30 minutes. No.
Sorry?
You said 30 minutes, and I spoke 30 minutes. Did I?
No problem, because there was a problem. That is okay. Perfect.
Okay.
No problem. Please. Okay. There are no questions. That I have some questions to your interesting relation.
We can also just go to Grégoire and then we come back later. Maybe, I don't know.
No. Please continue.
Okay.
The first question is about you speak about the ecological transitions. Use the plural and not singular. That you think that are different kind of ecological transition. Second question is about BRICS. Is interesting this kind of experience, but could be interesting also focus on the South-South cooperation literature. In general, this kind of literature underline that the South-South cooperation is important, but within countries of the same geographical area. This is quite a particular case, that which is the common points within these countries, not GDP. Perhaps there are some political points, and if there are some, which is the political strategy, because ecological transition in this period represent an important political strategy, and that can provoke important international conflict. That here you are Brazil, India, China, Russia, South Africa, very different countries, probably were very different political strategy. I don't know which is the common political strategy, and which is the role of ecological transition, if the role is important or not, to take together these very heterogeneous countries, because in this time ecological transition represent more an obstacle than a common point within the countries around the world.
Yeah.
Sorry.
These are very good questions,
very short answer, but very interesting your presentation.
Thank you, Giulio, for the comments. These are very, very interesting questions, and at some point I was also struggling with them. So the first one, and try to understand, are there different ecological transitions? Of course, there are different patterns, and I say transitions because every country will have a different trajectory. Of course, these are countries that had nothing to do with. There's no common glue getting together Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. There are relationships between South Africa and India, maybe Brazil and China, but it's a club of countries that have nothing necessarily to do with. However, it is a platform for these countries to actually galvanize and to get a bigger voice in the international arena. The BRICS have served as a main understanding that if the developed countries do not cooperate with the developing ones and with the emerging ones, the emerging countries can actually get to cooperate between themselves. And that's why I think the new development bank becomes an important tool for financing the transitions, because it offers the possibility for them not to go to the World Bank, for them not to go to any kind of already established multilateral development system, so that they know that if they need financing for the transitions, which will be nationally decided, it's not a politically decided plan and from the above, they will have a bigger voice and a more important voice when they negotiate with the IMF, with the World Bank. So in a sense, it is an important institution to kind of give more legitimacy and give more power to these countries, which are very important in the international arena, but already are facing the constraints that they cannot negotiate alone. And in a sense, they are not regionally together, but they have chosen for at least 10 years to be together, to get that platform, to get cooperated. So in a sense, I agree with your points 100%. And I do feel that the challenge is how to increase that cooperation. It is a choice of the current governments, and we see in some of the countries of the BRICS that this has not been the case, but it still is a powerful means and a powerful platform for these countries to cooperate. And what I'm saying right now is that for the ecological transition, this bank matters a lot. But thanks for the questions.
Yes, thank you so much for your answer. I think it's important to analyze in depth the origins of this project to understand the vision and the future for this cooperation. And okay, thank you so much. But there are the problem with the other speaker, Grégoire, Noël. Then probably
in this case,
one moment.
I think you.
Okay, there is not Grégoire at the moment. Then probably I can present my contribution. Okay, and after we can finish with the Grégoire. One moment, I write to the coordinator about this aspect. One moment, and okay, Grégoire.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. I think the very case that digital transition also is important. Okay.
So can you hear me well? It's very weird, actually. I feel like there's someone in the shadow making me appear and disappear.
Okay, no problem.
Okay,
please,
I hope it will not happen during the presentation.
Present your contribution, your important contribution, and I will reduce my time. Okay, room for the young people.
No worry, my presentation should be around 20 minutes.
Okay, you have all time that you need. Please, Grégoire, Noël, your relation is about modeling the economy as a dissipative structure with scarce resources.
Yeah, so can you see my full screen right now?
Yes, please. The floor is yours.
Okay, cool.
Okay, please.
So, thank you for allowing me to present my work. The work that I represent is purely theoretical, but very simple. The question that is addressed is the dependence of growth on natural resources. So it starts with realizing that economic processes are set in the physical realm. And even if physical laws are obviously not sufficient to describe economic processes, at the very least, economic processes cannot contradict the physical laws. Okay, so it starts also with the assumption or the realization again that the matter that composes the economy, like the material, the manufactured goods, the capitals, the infrastructures, everything, is made of matter, which is in a state of a certain orderliness, which is a state far from equilibrium, far from thermodynamic equilibrium, which is not a state in which matter is found itself spontaneously in nature, right? The natural direction of time rather go towards homogeneity and disorder, according to the second principle. So actually, what the economy does to create locally order is that it needs to exchange perpetually flows of matter and energy with its environment. It's an open system, as we call it. And the term introduced by Prigogine for this type of metabolism that managed to fight locally against the second law and maintain its internal order is what we call a dissipative structure. So this general picture of the economy as anthropic was mainly introduced by Georgescu-Roegen, mainly predecessors like Podolinsky, but it has not yet reached the state of being of proposing an actual theory of production that directly derive from the laws of thermodynamics. So this is what I've been trying to do, but not only. So this is for the fundamental question that is raised by the paper. Can we write it? Can I derive from the axiomatic formulation of thermodynamics a formalism allowing me to describe economic production as a thermodynamic production, thermodynamic conversion? And on the other hand, there's also the practical aim of the paper, which is why do we want to actually model economic production as a thermodynamic conversion? It's also to be able to assess the macroeconomic consequences of the depletion of natural resources. Not only the depletion of the natural resources, but also the degradation of their quality, something that relates to the second principle. So to do this, I will try. This is the main contribution of the paper to derived some production function for the production of manufactured goods from the laws of thermodynamics, and to assess the potential economic consequences of the depletion of natural resources on macroeconomic dynamics. I will couple it with some macroeconomic model, very simple, that is grounded on the assumption that macroeconomics is grounded on social interaction between aggregate agents identified by their emergent behaviors. So I'm coupling, if you wish, a macro theory on one side, thermodynamics, with another macro-founded theory on the other side, some macro-founded approach to macroeconomic modeling. So I need to say just a few words probably about the two principles of thermodynamics, which are the basis of the formalism of irreversible thermodynamics. There's the first principle that you probably know as the law of conservation of energy and matter. And basically its consequence is that if in a given region of space, in a certain environment, let's say a certain material, you have two thermodynamic quantities, like two types of material which are coupled together, because there's always 1 degree of liberty of freedom which is missing in thermodynamics. This is due to some invariance. You may have a coupling between flows of different variables. This is what happens when you hit a ball with another one, right? So the flow of matter, the kinetic movement, hit the second one, and you've converted the flow of a certain quantity into the flow of another quantity. And how was it done? It was done by converting the energy carried by the flow of the first quantity to making the other quantity flow. But this conversion of energy is never perfect. There's often heat dissipation, and only a certain quantity of the energy carried by the initial flow can be converted to the flow. So this is what revolves around the first principle and around the second principle. So it is often known as the law of entropy. It's the principle that gives you the direction of times and that defines the final state of a system as the equilibrium, which is defined as the equilibration of all potential imbalances, meaning the corollary of this principle is that if you have a potential imbalance, like a state of disequilibrium somewhere, then the spontaneous direction of time is to generate a flow that will go in the direction of compensating the potential imbalance. So this is at this level very abstract, but I needed to state this type of concept to use them to try to model, as I said already many times, economic production as a thermodynamic conversion. So the idea is to say the following. The commodities, objects that do our everyday life, that are consumption goods but also capital goods, are ordered matter. By the first principle that matter does not come from anywhere, it needed to come from somewhere, but initially in the environment, it was in a state of lesser order, of lower potential. But to improve the quality, to order up this initially raw material resource into an ordered early output commodities, we needed to input in this matter energy, to input order in it. And this energy as well, still from the first principle, could not come from anywhere. It needed to come from somewhere. It needed to come from the degradation of another type of resource also found in the environment. So what this simple story tells you is that you need at least to consider two types of resources, which are strictly complementary and strictly non-substitutable. The energy resources that you degrade to extract useful energy, and the matter resources that you input energy into it to order it up and form the commodities. So what's interesting is that they play complementary and asymmetric roles, these two resources, and to the units where these two conversion happens. The first one being the degradation of energy resources to extract useful energy. The second conversion being using that input useful energy to order up, to augment the quality of initially low quality resources into outputting material goods. To each of these units will correspond, in the simple model that I try to derive, a sector. And to their complementary thermodynamic role of this unit will correspond also complementary economic roles, because you see the energy the matter sector will use the output of the energy sector as intermediary consumption, while the energy sector and the matter sector both will depend on the matter sectors for its new investment, because it will buy the new machine. The new machine will be produced by the matter sector for both the energy sector and the matter sector. Okay. So you see that you have a duality, a superposition, that the physical structure will be mirrored by the financial structure of the model. And so both sectors, very traditional, will grow through capital accumulation as time goes on and the economy grows. Just to say simply, there needs to be a balance between the size of the two sectors, because I will assume the matter sector to be supply driven, and so the economy itself to be supply driven. But the energy sector, I will assume that it is demand driven, that it only adapts its production and so also its size to the demand in energy of the matter sector. And of course, the relative size needed by both sectors will need to evolve according to how will evolve the quality or the abundance or scarcity of the two types of resources. Because if to make an object that is at the same level of orderliness, you need to start from initially very poor quality material resources. You will need much more energy to order this matter to the state of complexity that you want it to reach, for instance. Okay. So basically, saying everything that I said, I've drawn there the physical structure of my economy from doing some very simple additional assumption on the thermodynamic setup. I can derive the productivity of both types of capital, the productivity of the machines of the two sectors as endogenously depending on the quality of the input resources that it depends on. You can compute the entropy production, the fact that locally we create order at the expense of exerting globally greater entropic pressure. So this is already verified that we really are in the process of modeling the economy as a dissipative structure. And yeah, so it's not a result, it's rather that this whole simple derivation is done in such a way, because it was inspired from it, so as to reflect the view that the value of an economic good, a good, of course, not a service, relies on how much energy has been embedded into it. And we also find again the point famously made by Bob Harris that real GDP is proportional to the flow of what's called useful work that is generated in the economy. We also see that so the energy and matter plays very complementary and asymmetric role. And actually we see that in this sense, it's always the energy resource that is always the limiting agent, because past some point you will have degraded completely. You won't be able to extract any additional energy from the energy resources if its quality has become too bad. But for the material resources, it can get almost infinitely degraded. You will just need an infinite amount of energy to augment its quality. So there's a huge asymmetry in the consequences there of the relative scarcity of both resources. So this was for a proposal to model the production of manufactured goods. Now to ask the question, how would the degradation of the quality of natural resources affect growth, but also may economic indicators, in principle, non-related, which should not be related to physical laws, but purely economic, de-incarnated processes, like, for instance, income distribution. Could they be nonetheless affected somehow by some indirect channels by the depletion of natural resources? So I've tried to ask this question still in a simple theoretical framework by adapting some economic closure from a very simple model, the Goodwin model of growth and cycles. So the assumption is that so now, after having drawn the thermodynamic structure, I will draw the social structure of this very simple toy model, saying that capital actually to operate needed labor. Labor is being paid, and so on. In this model, there is no bank. Investment is financed by retained profit. And what's important to say is that the structure, the financial structure of the economy, again, is mirroring the thermodynamic structure of the economy, because every flow of energy or matter is mirrored by a flow of money. It's the case also for the flow of labor, like labor is being paid. Yeah, but so no, I can say quickly that labor is treated classically there, because I only try to assess the question of the dependence on growth on natural resources. So I only model thermodynamically what is called the exosomatic part of the economy, meaning the machines and infrastructure, and labor and the flesh, like humans, ecosystemic services, are modeled here in a very classical manner. Yet the two realms, economic and macroeconomic, are very intricated, because the structure of one is dependent on the structure of the other. They have to mirror each other. So as for income distribution, it is actually determined through the prices, which are fixed by markup pricing, so a margin over the cost of production. And the cost of production is found, of course, to so depend on the productivity of the capitals, but thus also to depend on the abundance or the quality of the resources, the two resources, energy and matter resources, that the industrial economic process depend on. So what we find is that in the model, there is no intertemporal inflation that is considered. So the only thing that matters dynamically is the ratio of the prices, which is found to depend on the relative abundance of the resources. And also the simple closure that I've chosen to go beyond addressing simply the question of growth, but to add one more instance of an economic variable that may evolve and be impacted by the depletion of natural resources, even though its dependence is not direct and is not obvious. I've introduced a short-term Phillips curve on the determination of wages, and so we will see what happens. Also, finally, technical progress, I can differentiate two types, but I've assumed them both to be given exogenously. So this economic closure will give you a natural rate of growth of the economy, and it will be interesting to see how the natural growth of the economy actually may be affected by the environment in which, the physical environment in which the economy is set in. So at this stage, the model is closed. It's actually three-dimensional, but it's clear to write it this way. I will jump to a simulation just to show you what happened. I can differentiate two scenarios. So I have made a very simple assumption, like there is one single all-purpose good that is at the same time the consumption good, the capital good, the investment good. There is two types of resources, but among each resources, I have assumed it's as if they were all aggregated, or it's as if there were only one energy resource and one matter resource, right? So in this scenario, in this case, you can distinguish qualitatively only two scenarios. Either energy is more scarce compared with matter, but actually since section 1, we know what happened, that energy shortages will force the industry to enter a recession, because real GDP is directly proportional to the generation and the usage of useful energy. But the scenario which is a bit more interesting dynamically is the scenario when matter is more scarce compared to energy, according to what we see next. So these are the simulation that the different curves that I can show you. So in the purple curve is real GDP. Okay, it's a semi-logarithmic plot of real GDP over time, over 400 years. So what is observed is in the first phase, in the first 200 years, when resources are abundant, both types of resources are abundant, we recover, we recover the Goodwin model, which is from which I have adapted the economic closure of my model. So we recover the fact that the economy grows exponentially at the exogenous natural rate that is given as the sum of technical progress and the growth of the population. Now, interestingly, when matter starts being degraded, what is happening is that the economy enter a phase of long-standing stagnation. The growth of the economy is slowed down, and it is actually slowed down by a quantity that is proportional to the rate at which the resource quality is being degraded up. It also comes at the same time with an accelerating energy consumption, because if the input matter is if its quality gets degraded of the input material, and that you still want to produce output goods at the same level of complexity, you need a greater amount of energy consumption. Finally, you can see it in the last plot, where is plotted the ratio of the prices in gray. In orange, it's the evolution of the wage share, and in green, it's the evolution of the employment rate. So in the Goodwin model, technical progress actually is thought to benefit the worker category, but we see that on the other hand, so the depletion of natural resources actually has a dynamical impact on income distribution, even though the assumption deciding income distribution was purely economic. It was I've assumed the form of the Phillips curves, that is the intermediation that determines the income distribution, to be fixed over time, so that institutionally nothing changes, but effectively workers lose effective bargaining power as resources become increasingly scarce or poor quality. So what we see is that secular stagnation, in which we enter due to the scarification of the material resources, is also accompanied with a decline in the wage share. And also the elongation of the business cycle, and also interestingly, from this type of integrated model between some economic dynamic and some modeling of economic production as thermodynamic conversion, we can deduce some dynamical criterion, which is more restrictive than the usual kinematic criterion, energetic kinematic criterion, that the energy return on investment should be greater than 1 for an economy to be sustainable. Actually, there's a criterion that is dynamical, which may be more constraining than the simple kinematic criterion. So what I can say more, I don't know how much time I have. Actually, I don't hear anyone, or I don't see messages if you're writing in the comments to tell me that I'm going over time. So at the very center of the work that I've done is just that, from actually starting from the laws of thermodynamics to try to derive a thermodynamically consistent theory of production, of the production of manufactured goods, it points out the need to consider at least 2 complementary resources which play complementary in asymmetric roles. Because of this asymmetrical treatment, it leads to asymmetrical consequences of their relative depletion, which is interesting. The last prediction that I proposed, the fact that the depletion of natural resources may benefit the owner class and increase inequality by shifting income distribution. Actually, it's dependent on the choice of the economic closure, and the economic closure that I've chosen, it's supply driven, it's profit led. The cycles that are there are profit squeezed. It's a very it's a very simple model, and it's realistic, and you don't have to believe in it. I don't either. It was just chosen to be illustrative, that depletion of natural resources may impact not only the natural rate of growth of the economy, but also other unexpected economic variables. So this result is dependent on the choice of the economic closure. What's interesting is that the result that energy scarcity can trigger crises and that matter scarcity can cause secular stagnation, this is independent actually of the choice of the economic closure. It's only dependent on the way I have described the physical structure of the economy. And there's also things to be said on that side, because, for instance, to extract energy, you need energy in the sense that you need to have built machines that would allow you to extract energy from the energy resources, but you don't need energy itself to go find the energy resources. So on that side, my model is also overly simplistic, but still it is demonstrative, I guess, and it's the first step in any case of the fact that so growth depends on resources and the complementarity of the 2 types of the resources, and also interestingly the fact that the rate at which the quality of the natural resource stocks is being degraded is negatively subtracted from the natural rate of growth of the economy. Actually, you can also realize that oppositely, if we find some new resources of really high energy quality, then the rate of growth of the economy will be also positively affected by the change, by you will add the rate at which the material that are being used by the economy, thanks to this discovery, would suddenly increase. So, and yeah, just to say, at this stage, it was purely like a thought experiment, some simple theoretical construction, some attempt to bridge thermodynamic and economic into some very simple but integrated model and view of the economy. But there exists a lot of data, and past some point we should try to not stay just theoretical, but maybe try to actually picture concretely what is behind the equation that I proposed. Thank you. So I don't see.
Yeah, I think, okay. No, thank you, Grégoire. Noël. I think the mechanism is that when the speaker share the slides, the other speakers, like a game, disappear automatically.
Okay. Okay.
But now we lost the João.
So maybe can stop sharing my screen.
No, it's okay, perfect. I have very also your article. I think this is a part of your dissertation thesis. I think no, it's an article. It is very long, very ambitious project, research project. I think.
Oh, but cool. But no, of course it will somehow. I think I will do a paper-based thesis, so that will be, let's say, the first chapter.
No, yes, because there are many paths to continue the analysis. I have some questions, some about some details. The firstly is about you speak about energy capital productivity and matter capital productivity. I would like to know if these kind of variables are given or there are some endogenous mechanisms. Sorry for some question, but you are present many equations that probably I don't understand. I didn't understand all, but I think this is an important question. If there are a mechanism that endogenize the energy capital productivity, because you say that the GDP is proportional to energy, but this kind of proportionality could be relevant to understand the future, in the sense that the proportionality means the productivity, GDP and energy, that the relationship change or not in your simulations, or there are some mechanisms that can change this relationship. This is the first question. Second question is about a point. You say that the economic value is equal to the embodied energy. I don't understand the meaning of this. Economic value, because after you present the price equation, what means economic value? Okay. The other point, use the term useful work. Is a sort of a classical meaning about what means useful work. Useful for what? And the other is about the price equation, in the sense that you present a price equation that there is not energy or raw materials. In the sense, in price equation sigma I, in the PEDIX I. This is the general good sector, I think. No?
So I will try to answer the question in the order you asked them. Okay. So the expression for the productivity of the capital units, the machines of the energy sector, of the matter sector, they are derived from setting up the thermodynamic structure. They are not given they derive from simple assumption that I've made. That is, so as I said, you don't need energy to go extract the energy resources. I assume that the energy, the potential difference from which I can extract energy, useful energy. So sorry, I will first explain what is useful energy so that I can continue this little storyline.
You say useful work.
Yeah, useful energy and useful work is the same.
Okay.
It's just, yeah.
Okay,
the useful there, it doesn't have an economic meaning. It's a term that is used in thermodynamics. Useful energy, when you convert, so I will go on that slide. Useful energy on this diagram, it's the E, the variable E, okay? So I have there the energy resource, which is as a potential higher than the same resource, but after I have extracted all the energy that I could extract from it. It contains order, and it can reach only a minimal state of disorder, if you wish. So it's from this imbalance that you can extract, that you can generate a flow, and it's from the coupling of that flow with some other variable that you would be able to convert some of the energy that is carried by the flow that is spontaneously going in the direction of equilibrating the imbalance. So you are extracting the energy from your resource, and the maximal energy that you can extract actually corresponds from that difference. Okay, so it's proportional to the difference in potential.
Okay, it's lower than 100%.
Yeah, it's always lower than 100%.
Yes, this is the point.
This is called Carnot efficiency. And this is true even for a reversible process. So it has nothing to do with heat dissipation. It is not linked to the non-ideality of the conversion. The non-ideality of the conversion is also something that I've assumed. But even without it, the non-ideality of the conversion would reduce even more the efficiency of the conversion. But even an ideal conversion has an efficiency of conversion which is never equal to 1. So useful energy, it's, if you wish, the energy that is carried by a flow of a quantity, of some thermodynamic quantity, that is easily converted back into another flow. So this useful energy, E, you can think that my resource actually, because the potential difference already existed, let's say that it's that I have a dam, and that it's water that is high, so that has in it a lot of gravitational energy, and the west is the water on the other side of the dam, which cannot go further down. So from that water, we will not be able to convert additional energy. So if in your dam you have a hole, then to equilibrate the potential imbalance, the imbalance will generate a flow, so water will flow through the dam. And if you have some turbine, right, this flow of matter, you will convert it into the mechanical movement of the turbine. And if you have some magnet, you will convert this mechanical movement into electricity. And this electricity will carry some energy that you may use to, this is in the very abstract and simple image that I've used, that you will use that electricity to reshape some part of the dam into other turbines, actually.
Okay, it's a sort of engineering mechanism that is probably more engineeristic than economic point. It's quite and what is about the useful work is similar to useful energy. That is the point, and which is here the market pricing. Not in this case. My question is about the market pricing, the price equation that you consider the markup over the unit labor cost. No.
Yes.
But
So,
there isn't natural raw material unit cost or energy unit cost.
yeah.
Why?
So there I've written. So the index I refers to the energy sector and the matter sector, right? So in the case of the energy sector, if you look at this matrix, the only factor input that I have to pay of my production is labor. So there, in the case of the price of energy, it would only depend on the price of the labor used to operate the machines used to extract useful energy from the energy resources. But in the case of the matter sector, I have two factor input that I need to pay. I have the wages of the labor that I'm using, but also the intermediary consumption of the useful energy that is purchased to the energy sector. So there, my unit cost of production of some unit of material output commodity depends on two things. It depends on the price of labor and the price of useful energy.
As you see, is being not unit labor cost, but unit cost.
Yeah, it's just unit cost.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
There are any questions? Do you add João Pedro to the screen? Listen Borbosa? No. Try to close your.
Yeah.
Don't know if João Pedro has some question, or there are some question. Bon dia, only good morning and bon dia from the YouTube, but there is not João Pedro. Sorry, no.
Okay.
I can no. Okay, and then I need to present my contribution. Okay, I'm still here. Okay, João Pedro, I believe in you, but we not see you in the screen. Have you some question that you want to write for Grégoire, Noël, or not? Or we can proceed with my presentation. No. Okay, I think it's okay. We have a discussion after yours. Okay. I think I don't know if there will be time, but okay. Now you will disappear, and I will present my article. Is not you can see. I think yes. You can see this.
Oh yeah, okay.
Perfect. Here there are the two titles. The original is the Ecological Structural Change and the Middle Income Trap, and the second title is Ecological Transition and Structural Change, a Developmentalist Analysis. This article written with José Luis Oreiro. In the presentation, José Luis Oreiro spoke about this idea of ecological structural change, that we want to analyze this kind of intuition within the framework of developmentalism. The idea is to concentrate on structural change and ecological issues and the role of green activities on the Dutch disease. That is one of the main focus of the developmentalism, developmentalist analysis. The first point is to consider the ecological transition is composed of two kind of elements: ecological technical progress, in general, a general reduction of the environmental pressure in terms of impact, pollution intensity, and so on, or use of natural resources, raw material intensity, ecological footprint, and so on. And the other element is ecological structural change. the shift of labor or value added from economic activities with high environmental pressure intensity, that we can call shortly brown activities, to economic activities with a low environmental pressure intensity that we can call green activities. Obviously, there is not a specific definition. We can have a wide version like in the previous slide, or we can have a narrow version. For instance, OECD and Eurostat define the eco-industry, activities which produce goods and services to measure, prevent, limit, minimize, or correct environmental damage to water, air, and soil, as well as problems related to waste, noise, and ecosystem. That there are two kind of a wide version and a narrow version about what we consider as green activities. We can consider here a sort of static representation of the role of ecological transition. With the EP, we measure the environmental pressure that is equal to, in this expression, in this equation, 1. Y is the GDP, and Y epsilon represent the green activities, and the green activities share with respect to GDP. Which is the main message of this identity, is that we can decrease environmental pressure by or decrease general environmental intensity, or by increasing the green activity share represented by epsilon. We want to consider a relationship between ecological structural change, and we define ecological structural change the increase of the green activity share. We want to create a link between sustainable development goals and ecological structural change by consider goal 9, sustainable development goals, that is a strategy of UN Agenda 2030. Build a resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. This kind of goal is also the same that João presented before about the strategy of BRICS countries and New Development Bank. And that here we want to, the first step is to consider in analytical term this kind of relationship between industrialization and ecological structural change. That in this case, we start with a standard technological progress function of Caldor, with the integration of Oreiro and other authors. In this case, the integration is represented by gamma. GY is the growth rate of output per worker, means labor productivity, the growth rate of labor productivity. Key is the growth rate of capital per worker, and gamma is the manufacturing share in output. That in this case, gamma, the increase of gamma represents industrialization. The idea of the long run growth rate of labor productivity is equation 3. Gamma, an increase of gamma favors the increase of labor productivity growth. And we want to consider the inclusive and sustainable industrial development. That is an initiative of the UNIDO or UNIDO, starting by from the IPAT identity. Equation 4 means that the increase of environmental pressure depends upon this difference, the GDP, the growth rate of GDP, Y, minus Z, that represent can represent the green productivity. Green productivity is the opposite, the inverse of environmental pressure. That the weak sustainability condition can means stationary state of the environmental pressure. That we can consider this kind of condition. We start with this kind of equation, and we relate this equation with another identity, a very traditional income identity, that the growth rate of GDP is equal to the growth rate of labor productivity plus the growth rate of labor employment rate. The long-run sustainability condition is this. With some steps, we arrive to consider this kind of condition. That means could be an inclusive and sustainable industrial development could include these three important variables. Epsilon means the green activities share, N, that means employment rate, and gamma, that means the manufacturing share, that industrialization. That this is a sort of instrument, analytical instrument, to analyze the sustainable, inclusive and sustainable industrial development. We want to increase N, inclusive development, but industrial development, but also increase gamma for industrialization and epsilon for a sustainable industrial development. We here substitute y with a positive function of labor productivity. Is a very traditional function presented, for instance, in the article of Ocampo, minus the growth rate of labor productivity, that can represent the complementarity between labor green productivity and labor productivity. The final equation means that gamma can reduce the environmental pressure only if epsilon is higher than B. B represents the brown activity share and epsilon the green activity share. The idea is that industrialization can represent an important pillar for ecological transition only if we increase the green activities. That here is this simple formula can contains two important aspects. One is the structural complementarity, in the sense that the complementarity between ecological structural change and industrialization, and second aspect, industrial sustainable development, the twin structural change. We consider now we enter in the developmentalist framework, that we consider the industrialization equation. Here, gamma at gamma represent in this case the growth rate of the manufacturing, and depends on gamma in non-linear relationship, and negatively on technological gap. There is Q that represent the real exchange rate, and there is epsilon. The novelty is epsilon. And the nonlinear relationship. The nonlinear relationship means that before Lewis point, the accumulation increased because there is an increase of profit and wage remain constant. But after Lewis point, wage start to increase. That there is a decreasing rise of industrialization. But we want to focus on the novelty. Epsilon, the share of green activity, can stimulate industrialization. Why? We can consider price competitiveness, in the sense that green activities can reduce unit raw material and energy cost. You can consider here the original Calder price equation. No price competitiveness, in the sense that green activities generate new goods that can can have more quality perceived by consumers. We consider the complementarities between standard and green technologies, that this can generate knowledge spillovers for all kind of industries. Green activities represent or can open the room for new sources of competitiveness. For instance, we can consider ecotourism like a sector of industry that can offer new opportunities of business for hotels and so on. There are we can consider the backwards and forward linkages devised by Hirschman that can be reinterpreted by green perspective. We can consider the open innovation process. Green activities, thanks to green innovation, stimulate open innovation process that can help all kind of industries. But also eco-industry generate territorial economic spillover. Green activities can reduce the external vulnerability in terms of the uncertainty concerning the price volatility of the fossil energy, for instance, and that can we can consider the green activities that represent a preference for capital investment with respect of financialized speculation. We can consider circular economy like a new channel for production diversification, and also green activities as a strategy to for an import substitution concerning fossil sources. That there are many aspects that can affirm that the epsilon green activity share can increase industrialization. This is a point that is not relevant for our presentation. There is Dutch disease. That is, we say that is an important aspect. Dutch disease means the increase of the real exchange rate, the positive difference between the real exchange rate that permit the equilibrium, the competitiveness of the industry, minus the real exchange rate that in the current account, in the equilibrium in current account. This kind of positive difference means Dutch disease. And here the graph that is the consequence of the above mentioned equation state that with the low level of epsilon, low level of green activity is are related with the Dutch disease, that the high level of Dutch disease. Here you can consider we know, that at the beginning of 2000 years, there has been an over-evaluation of real exchange rate in Brazil, and we want to focus on the green side of Dutch disease, that in this case there is a deforestation, the reduction of the land covered by forest, and at the same time a very important increase of the land cover by soybean in Brazil. That there are other aspects that we don't want to consider, because we only I have time to present the eco-structural change equation. This is the equation. We want to consider how it's possible to increase the green activity share. And there are three main Dutch effects. The first is Dutch disease effect. Dutch disease is an obstacle for the green activity share growth. Why? Because Dutch disease increase the power of the activities based on the exploitation of natural resources. That is an economic power of the rentiers, but also of the workers in the short term, because the over-evaluation increase the real wage, and this aspect reinforce the brand of the at the international level of the country as a raw material country. It is this element, this effect, Dutch disease effect, reinforce the so-called, or what we call ecological macroeconomic trap. No, because Dutch disease decrease the low level of green activity, increase the Dutch disease, and this Dutch disease reinforce the difficulties to start with the ecological transition, because there is not the political support by the rentiers and the workers. The second point is the technological gap, because ecological transition is more complex in terms of technology and needs for international knowledge transfer, that in this case we have to increase the technological level and technological capability. So this is another another trap, in this case eco-technological trap, because the technological gap reduce because high technological gap obstacles the technological transfer necessary to enlarge the green activity and share. And the low share of green activities make industry more dependent on high level of real exchange rate to maintain the competitiveness. That in this case is sort of another kind of trap. And finally, there are a dynamic. The third effect is the green policy effect. Epsilon, with this kind of underline, this line represents the green target for Eastern Sustainable Development Goals. The idea, the gap should stimulate the growth of the growth of a green activity share. And theta 2 can represent the efficiency or the effectiveness of the green policies to overcome this kind of trap, the ecological macroeconomic trap and the ecological eco-technological gap. After, there are some analysis about the interaction between the industrialization equation and the ecological structural change. But the main idea is that the final remarks is that we want to consider the green side of Dutch disease that represent important traps that can overcome thanks to macroeconomic policies to introduce some export tax over primary goods that will increase the manufacturing chain, and under certain conditions also the share of green activities. Is important industrial policies to reduce the temporary losses of real wage produced by the exchange rate depreciation, and at the same time to reduce the technological gap that increase the technological capability. Finally, the institutional policies to make green policies effective, and then to take part of an international cooperation to have important green target, for instance, by cooperating with other countries. Okay, that I think I need to finish my presentation. I'm alone, but I hope there are other person with me. João, Pedro, Grégoire, Noël, that have you. I'm speaking like in a radio to maintain the time. I don't know if you have some questions to me, or there are some questions to the internet. No, not from internet. I don't know if you have some questions. João, Pedro, Braga, please. You are Portuguese. You are Portuguese.
I'm Brazilian.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because Braga is a city in Portugal.
Exactly.
Please.
Thanks for the presentation, Giulio. I really do feel that it's interesting because you're trying to combine, I see at least, like, these two discussions that we had, both me and Grégoire, I do feel that they also intersect with your presentation, at least for the extent that the cooperation for development, the cooperation for sustainability, it is something more than just taking into account national development strategies. But like, I just wanted to take into one specific point, which is the idea that green industrial policy can actually be part of the SDGs and can actually be implemented if you understand the growth strategies and the growth patterns of one specific country. And since you focus on Brazil, I actually wanted to ask you at some point, do you feel that this can at some point not be a state policy, it can actually get to be a state policy, not a government policy at some point? Because what we see, all of the problems that we get to when we are operationalizing it is that after 5 years, the government changes and then priority changes. And if you don't get a re-election, the idea of a green industrial policy actually goes into the waters. So I'm just trying to understand and make sense of your program and what you actually were your policy recommendations in terms of applying this into a specific country. It could be Brazil, could be Italy as well. I'm not sure, but like just to understand what does it exactly mean. But I really enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you. Other question? I don't know. Grégoire, Noël? No? Okay. Okay, thank you, João Pedro. You consider an important point, a sort of challenge, in the sense that I think your point is open the room for another research field about the question of institutional change for the ecological transition. In this paper, we only underline the fact that it's important the integration of international cooperation to put within the national policy some targets, but at the same time, it's important also that this kind of gap between international target and the real actual current level of green activities share, this kind of ecological gap should stimulate and make the green policies effective to reduce this kind of gap. That in this point, at this step, this kind of research only want to underline the complexity of ecological structural change, in the sense that if you consider structural change as industrialization, you speak about mainly about supply side or some aspect of demand side, but in this case the demand side have a more higher in lato sensu, in the sense that political aspect elements are important. For instance, you can consider that the devaluation can is also called a sort of over-evaluation is called also over-evaluation populism by Bresser Pereira, in the sense that over-evaluation in the short term can offer advantage for workers, but in the medium and long term can create generate the elements to remain in the trap of Dutch disease. That this is another important aspect, that here there are not the solution, but only to underline some, to light about the different elements that regard the ecological structural change, that by definition is more complex than structural change, namely industrialization, because consider technological aspect, macroeconomic aspect, and also political, important political aspect. Okay, that is the idea. Okay, that I think we are finished, because our 4 minutes after 6 p.m. That I think there is a sort of a music break. And thank you very much for your presentation, and good luck for your research. It's very important to have a young scholar in this kind of workshop, because the sense is to share research and share comments and potential stimulates for other kind of research. Okay. Thank you so much, João Pedro, and
Thank you.
Noël, and all people that follow us online. I don't think by YouTube or like this. Okay. See you.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for the paper. See you.
Have a good time. Bye.